General Hospital will reveal step by step. Gio carved out a quiet but undeniable space for himself at the heart of Port Charles. His presence weaving deeper into the fabric of the town's ever-evolving drama. On the surface, he was the picture of charm, a sensitive violinist with an unassuming smile, soft-spoken demeanor, and an almost poetic aura. Audiences were drawn to his gentle spirit, his apparent innocence, and the tragic beauty of a boy seemingly lost in the rhythms of music and memory. But what no one saw, not the Quartermaines, not Sonny, not even those who claimed to care for him, was the raging inferno hidden behind his eyes. That fire had been quietly burning for years. Ignited the moment he was discarded like a secret too shameful to acknowledge. And now, as the spotlight slowly turned toward him, Gio wasn't just stepping into the role fate had written for him, he was here to rewrite it, on his own terms, with vengeance as the ink and pain as the pen. When Gio first arrived in town, his wild, curly hair and boyish smile gave off the impression of a wandering artist, a soft breeze in a town used to hurricanes. He was mistaken for a supporting character. Someone whose purpose would be to bring levity or warmth in the background of larger storylines. But that illusion was carefully constructed, cultivated by Gio himself to mask the storm within. From the moment he set foot in Port Charles, he knew exactly who he was and exactly why he was there. He wasn't some poor lost soul searching for family or belonging. He was the forgotten son. The abandoned child. The one left behind by a mother too young and a father too absent to face the consequences of their choices. His mission wasn't to reconnect, it was to expose, to upend, and ultimately, to punish. Gio had known the name Brook Lynn since his earliest memories. It haunted his childhood like a ghost that everyone could see but no one dared speak of with compassion. In foster homes and whispered arguments, she was described as selfish, impulsive, too wrapped up in her own image and career to keep the baby she bore. Gio learned about her through bitterness. Not bedtime stories. He internalized those narratives, letting them harden into a protective armor over his soul. As the years passed and he began to piece together the full picture of his origins, he uncovered not only his mother's identity but also the name of the man who had helped create him, Dante, a decorated police officer, a man hailed as brave and just, but to Gio, just another ghost who chose silence over responsibility. What stung the most wasn't just the abandonment, but the secrecy, the way his existence was buried like a scandal rather than acknowledged as life. He wasn't a child given up for a better future, he was a wound they all tried to forget. But Gio never forgot. He carried their silence like a weight around his heart, letting it shape him, harden him. By the time he made his quiet entrance into Port Charles, he was no longer a lost child but a carefully calibrated force of reckoning. He already knew the blood that ran through his veins. He knew of Tracy Quartermaine's ruthless precision, of Sonny's brutal loyalty, and of Brook Lynn's deep insecurities hidden beneath bravado. He had studied them all, as one might study a chessboard, calculating every move, every weakness, every fracture he might one day exploit. He kept the truth to himself not out of fear, but out of strategy. In every room, he listened more than he spoke. Watching as people stumbled over the idea of him, never suspecting just how deeply he understood the game they played. He didn't need to make noise to make impact. Every quiet act of kindness, every gentle nod, every graceful stroke of his bow across the strings of his violin, it was all performance. Gio was the actor, the composer, and the director of his own rising symphony of revenge. While others saw a sweet young man connecting with Tracy or defending Sonny's legacy, Gio saw steps on a ladder leading directly to the past he had come to confront. He did not come to ask why. He did not come to beg for recognition. He came with the full knowledge of what was stolen from him, a childhood, an identity, a family. He came to reclaim it, but not with forgiveness. There would be no heartfelt reunion, no tearful apologies he longed to accept. He wanted the truth to hurt as much as the lie had. And he would not stop until Brook Lynn, Dante, And everyone who had chosen silence over love understood the full scope of what they had created, not a broken boy, but a man sharpened by betrayal. And Port Charles, in all its chaos, had no idea what was about to hit it. He didn't choose the violin because of passion. Music wasn't his sanctuary, it was his weapon. Each note he coaxed from the strings was a cry turned inward. A scream muted by necessity. The instrument became his shield against the chaos that pulsed inside him, the only thing capable of structuring the storm of betrayal, confusion, and abandonment that had defined his formative years. While others saw elegance in his performance, what they couldn't hear behind the beauty was the fury embedded in every movement of his bow, the unspoken anger wrapped in melody, the grief layered beneath each sustained note. He didn't play to feel, he played to contain. The violin kept him from breaking down, kept him from becoming the chaos he came from. As Gio quietly integrated himself into Port Charles's social and familial landscape, his appearances alongside longtime characters like Tracy, Jason, and Sonny were seen by many as touching, a young man finding purpose under the guidance of elder mentors. But Gio didn't see mentorship. He saw opportunity. These encounters were never merely social or coincidental, they were reconnaissance missions. In every conversation with Tracy, he parsed out how ruthless she could still be, whether her infamous cunning had dulled with age or simply become more refined. In Jason, he observed the balance between silence and intimidation, learning the intricacies of power built on presence rather than words. From Sonny, he studied the anatomy of legacy, how loyalty could be both a weapon and a trap. He made himself agreeable, polite, almost deferential. But beneath that polished exterior was a mind that never stopped calculating. He tracked weaknesses like a surgeon studying anatomy, emotional vulnerabilities, fractured loyalties, whispered regrets. Every seemingly innocent smile was a mask, every compassionate nod a test. Gio wasn't seeking connection, he was gathering intelligence. His eyes, though soft at first glance, held a glint of cold fire, a smoldering threat veiled beneath warmth. There was something about him that never quite settled. Something that kept others uneasy even as they praised his manners. Because the truth was, Gio wasn't just trying to belong, he was deciding who would fall first when the house of cards he now stood inside finally collapsed. And yet, despite all of this, Brook Lynn sensed something. She didn't have proof, only a gnawing feeling she couldn't explain, a tension that gripped her spine every time Gio was in the room. It wasn't fear, exactly, but a kind of haunting. She had buried the memories of that period in her life so deep that it took effort just to remember what it felt like to sign the papers, to walk away. Now, she found herself looking at this young man, hearing him play, watching how everyone gravitated toward him, and still feeling a distance she couldn't name. When she finally opened up to Tracy about the decision she had made as a teenager, her voice trembled beneath the weight of all the years that had passed since. She admitted that she wasn't ready. That she hadn't known how to be a mother, and that in her moment of greatest fear, she had done what she thought was the only thing she could. Tracy, always more practical than sentimental, asked the obvious question, had Brook Lynn ever tried to find him? Brook Lynn hesitated, then answered with words that even she didn't fully understand the gravity of until later. If he was meant to find me, he will. It was a surrender dressed up as philosophy, but it carried the sting of resignation. What she didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that Gio had been standing just down the corridor, unintentional witness to her confession. That moment, brief and unintended, struck Gio harder than any direct confrontation ever could. She hadn't searched. She hadn't even tried. It wasn't that she couldn't find him, it was that she hadn't wanted to. Her words didn't soothe him, they indicted her. To Gio, they confirmed everything he had suspected, that he had never truly been wanted. Not by Brook Lynn, not by Dante. Not by any of the people whose blood he carried. And though he told himself over and over that he had hardened his heart, that he had prepared for this exact kind of dismissal, Something in him cracked in that hallway. Not because he hoped she would have fought for him, but because she so clearly hadn't. He didn't need her love, he had stopped craving that long ago. But what lingered, what burned like acid beneath his ribs, was the understanding that even now, after all these years, she lacked the courage to face the truth. She couldn't even speak his name. Couldn't summon the strength to admit that the boy she abandoned might be standing closer than she ever dared to imagine. Gio didn't just feel unloved, he felt unseen. And that, to him, was a crime far worse than abandonment. It was erasure. From that moment on, Joe's demeanor shifted subtly. To those around him, he seemed just as polite, just as musically gifted, just as grateful. But a new chill had entered his presence, the kind that silences a room without sound, the kind that lingers even after he has walked away. His performances grew more intense, less restrained. As if the strings of his violin were bleeding his truth into the air for all to inhale without knowing what they were breathing in. Each bow stroke told a different version of his story, one where pain no longer asked for understanding, only acknowledgement. Brook Lynn had sealed her fate without ever realizing it. Her regret, so quietly spoken, had not gone unheard. And Gio, the boy she once relinquished in fear, had returned not for forgiveness, but to become the consequence of her choices. Lois and Gloria may have appeared to the world as meddling but well-meaning matriarchs, but in Joe's eyes, they were far more calculating than they let on. Behind the smiles, the loud laughter, and the affectionate gestures lay a sophisticated manipulation masked as family concern. They didn't simply welcome him into the fold, they curated his re-entry into the Cerullo legacy like architects designing a monument to their own redemption. By aligning Gio with Camilla Palmieri, a distant Cerullo cousin with a spotless reputation and deep community ties, they attempted to rewrite the narrative of his existence. This wasn't a reunion, it was a rebranding. They believed that by molding him into the right kind of Cerullo, loyal, polished, honorable, they could overwrite the stain of abandonment and the public embarrassment that had haunted their bloodline. But Gio, wiser and far more perceptive than they gave him credit for, recognized the orchestration from the start. He saw the subtle cues, the way Gloria always brought up Camilla in conversation, pretending it was an organic mention. Or how Lois gently nudged him toward events where Camilla would conveniently appear. It was all too perfectly choreographed, the shared dinners, the community concerts, the casual strolls through Bensonhurst memory lane. They were grooming him, not for acceptance, but for compliance. They wanted to place him like a chess piece at the heart of their social maneuvering, not understanding that Gio had already outgrown the board they were playing on. He began to study them in silence, turning every interaction into a lesson in psychological warfare. With Gloria, he learned the currency of image, her obsessive devotion to appearances. The way she treated social capital as more valuable than truth. Her greatest fear wasn't losing a loved one, but losing control over the story she told about her family. Gio knew that a few whispers in the right circles, a few withdrawn appearances, a few subtle nods that something was off, could shake her foundation more effectively than any confrontation. With Lois, it was more nuanced. Her Achilles heel wasn't vanity, it was legacy. Lois cared desperately about how she was remembered, how her choices impacted the family line. She feared scandal. Yes, but she feared irrelevance more. Gio exploited that by feeding her moments of affection, dropping crumbs of acceptance just enough to keep her engaged, invested, and vulnerable. And through it all, he never raised his voice. He never accused, never scolded. His revenge was refined, velvet-wrapped, elegantly executed. Every compliment was double-edged. Every expression of gratitude laced with silent reproach. He played the long game, like a master pianist holding a single aching note, knowing it would echo louder than any outburst. While they plotted ways to anchor him within the Cerullo legacy, he quietly unraveled their sense of control one gentle smile at a time. They thought they were taming him. In reality, He was letting them step deeper into a trap of their own making. Everything came into sharper focus when Gio publicly defended Tracy, a move that baffled many, given her intimidating reputation. But Gio understood power in a way others didn't. Tracy was the only one in that chaotic web of family dynamics who never masked her intentions. She was ruthless, yes, but honest about it. She didn't hide behind sentiment or performative family loyalty. When Drew attempted to demolish the Quartermain crypt, dismissing it as a relic of the past, Gio stepped in, not out of sentiment, but because he understood what that crypt represented. It wasn't just a mausoleum, it was a throne room made of marble and memory, a living testament to the forces that shaped the city itself. To destroy it was to desecrate the very foundation of the legacy Gio was now threading himself into, not out of belonging, but out of strategy. Aligning himself with Tracy was no coincidence. She didn't offer false affection or misplaced guilt, just a brutal honesty that Gio respected. By defending her, he wasn't pledging loyalty. He was making a move. Showing that he could hold his own among the titans of Port Charles, that he wasn't just a lost boy looking for family, but a calculating player choosing his allies with precision. It sent a clear message: he would not be maneuvered, and he was nobody's pawn. Similarly, his rapport with Sonny wasn't born of warmth. It was constructed, layer by layer, word by word. Gio spoke of Sonny's role in raising him with reverence, painting a portrait of a grateful surrogate son. But beneath the surface was another truth: Sonny represented stability. The kind of unflinching presence Gio had lacked his entire life. By aligning himself with Sonny, he gained both protection and credibility. It was a masterstroke, portraying himself as loyal and grounded, while all the while concealing the storm raging beneath. Gio understood the mythology of Sonny Corinthos better than most. He knew how loyalty operated like currency in Sonny's world, how earned trust could be weaponized. Brook Lynn, for all her conflicted feelings, had never managed to speak of Gio with that same clarity. While she stumbled over apologies and masked her shame in deflection, Gio built an image of himself as the dutiful son she never dared hope for. It was a cruel irony, perfectly executed. The very child she relinquished out of fear had returned not to seek her love, but to surpass her, to be everything she failed to become. He gave the appearance of reconciliation without offering its substance, and in doing so, held all the power in their fragile dance. He became what every legacy family in Port Charles feared, a mirror they couldn't control, reflecting back their failures with exquisite subtlety. To those watching, Gio seemed to be weaving himself into the heart of town life, performing at events, helping out at the hospital, embracing his tangled bloodlines. But those who looked closer, those who paid attention to the stillness behind his eyes and the cold control in his smiles, might begin to suspect that Gio hadn't returned to be part of their legacy. He had come to tear it apart, elegantly, quietly, and completely. The curly-haired boy who once radiated innocence was gone. In his place stood a man whose composed exterior masked years of abandonment and quiet rage. Gio no longer searched for answers or family. He already knew who had discarded him and why. His transformation wasn't just physical, but psychological. He had become deliberate, strategic, and emotionally armored. The polished appearance and soft-spoken nature were merely tools, camouflage for a mission rooted in truth, not reconciliation. Port Charles saw him as a symbol of healing. A gentle artist reuniting with his roots. But behind each polite smile and carefully chosen word, Gio concealed his true intent, to confront those who had erased him. Not with chaos but with calculated exposure. While others celebrated generational unity, he plotted the unraveling of every comfortable lie told to protect reputations. For Gio, forgiveness wasn't necessary, understanding was irrelevant. Only consequence mattered. He aligned himself with power, observed every weakness, and built an image of the ideal son, not to belong, but to disarm. To Lois and Gloria, he played the grateful heir. To Sonny, the loyal mentee. To Brook Lynn, the echo of her deepest regret. Yet beneath every interaction lay a storm he had been perfecting for years. Gio didn't return to ask for love, he returned to make sure the truth cut deeper than the silence ever did.